All right, good morning, everybody. I was going to listen to the radio, but the commercials are still on, so I'll answer one of the questions we got in a comment yesterday. And what the one of the commentators said on the video was that the biblical Jews of biblical times no longer exist, just like the ancient Romans no longer existed. You could probably say similar to the ancient Egyptians. I think certainly, they're not, the Arab people who live in Egypt are not the totally the descendants, or even, I don't know how much they are, of the ancient Egyptians. Although he didn't bring that up, I'm bringing that up. And then he said that once the temple was destroyed, they pretty much disappeared. I've discussed this issue, I think, as a misunderstanding of something that I might have said at one point. And the other question was that he started with was what is Judaism? What are Jews if not from the tribe of Judah? So that's part of the issue. So anyway, first of all, the name Jews, that applies to the kingdom of Judah, not necessarily the tribe of Judah. Obviously, the name of the kingdom of Judah comes from the tribe of Judah, but it goes back biblically to the book of 2 Kings, when, after the death of King Solomon, the kingdom split between the kingdom of Israel, or the northern kingdom, and the kingdom of Judah, and the southern kingdom. And so any inhabitant, whatever tribe one was from, if you were living in the kingdom of Judah, you were called Yehudi, or in plural Yehudim, and that's translated as Jew or Jews. And so once the northern kingdom was taken away by Sennacherib, then that was the end of any non-Jewish Israelites, pretty much. Which the fact of the matter was that members of the northern tribes, of the 10 tribes, did move into the kingdom of Judah. They were invited by Hezekiah, and so there was historically that. The next part was today's, and I had mentioned that I believe Judaism is a religion and not a race, because anybody from any race can convert to Judaism, and that heretics are not part of the Klal Yisrael, not part of the Jewish people. Particularly, you can argue about ones who hold on to the Jewish identity, but certainly ones who have abandoned and are ashamed of their Jewish identity. People like George Soros, people like Bernie Sanders, they're not part of our community. But there's another issue, and that's the ideology. And in the times of Jesus, who the Christians revere and the Muslims revere, there were many men named Jesus. We don't know which one this was, that we don't have really a record of this person in our traditional books. Some people have claimed that there's mention in our traditional books of their Jesus. There's someone named Yeshu who is mentioned, who lived 100 years earlier, who might bear some similarities in certain ways to the Christian Jesus, but it's obviously not the same person because they lived 100 years apart. In any event, if you read the Christian books that they added to the Bible, that they call the New Testament, they talk about the scribes and the Pharisees on one hand, which are kind of lumped together, even though they seem to be separate groups, and the Sadducees. There were other groups that are not mentioned, like the Essenes and so forth, but these were the major groups. When you say the biblical Jews, if you would mean in the sense of the Sola Scriptura Jews, those would be the Sadducees. They were the minority, they were the elitists, and they were often the not very educated, often illiterate, but wealthy and powerful priests. Priesthood, to this day in Judaism, is a hereditary priesthood that traces back to Aaron. But that means you're born a priest. You don't have to do anything to be ordained a priest. And so therefore there was a corruption historically and ideologically within much of the priesthood, and only a minority of the priesthood remained pious and authentic. In any event, for those who would venture to say that the Sadducees, those were the real Jews, and that these rabbinical Judaism were not, let's look at the words that are quoted and attributed to Jesus in the Christian Bible, in the book of Matthew. While Jesus was criticizing the Pharisees for some of their personality traits, he was not really criticizing their ideology. And in fact, he said, "Heed the scribes and Pharisees, for they sit in the seat of Moses." Basically, what Jesus was saying there is that the traditions of the scribes and the Pharisees are the authentic traditions of Moses. This is what God gave at Mount Sinai, just as rabbinical Judaism claims. His only beef with them was that some of the people were hypocrites, which the Talmud also criticizes the Pharisees for. The Talmud never self-identifies as Pharisees. They list a list of Pharisees, and they say the vast majority of them are hypocrites, and only those who are parush. The Hebrew word for a Pharisee is a parush, and that means really someone who practices abstinence. That if someone abstains, goes above the letter of the law, out of love of God or fear of God, then they are pious and worthy of respect. But the others are hypocrites, phonies, and fools. Kind of similar to what Jesus said. We do have record of the Sadducees calling the sages Pharisees. That's almost more like an insult. It's not a self-identification. It's kind of saying, oh, you guys, for having all this extra stuff, you are just like those who practice extra piety that's unnecessary. Even though certainly in certain things the Sadducees were more strict than the quote-unquote Pharisees. But in most things they were more lenient. And I know Rabbi Beryl Wein, who's a contemporary historian, is of the opinion that the Sadducees did this. They were just looking for excuses for their leniencies, and every now and then if they were caught in some sort of a intellectual dishonesty, then they would adopt something strict that was actually stricter than the Pharisees. But the truth of the matter is, historically, I mean, I know there is a story, I believe, in the book of John, in the Gospel of John, what the Christians call the Gospel of John. I say that because there are several books called John and what Christians call the New Testament, where Jesus says, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." And even though John there attributes that to the Pharisees, I would say historically, this method of stoning and this type of behavior would be something you would only see by the Sadducees and not by the Pharisees, or for a better term, not by the rabbinical Jews, because rabbinical Judaism in the Talmud kind of saw the death penalty as a deterrent that should be on the books but very rarely used. And so it would be extremely rare for a woman to be stoned for adultery, if it even ever happened among the rabbinical Jews. And in addition to that, the method of stoning was not people gathering around and casting stones like in the lottery. It was rather a what according to the rabbinical tradition is that a person who was to be stoned would be pushed off of a cliff. If they survived that, which they usually wouldn't, they'd have maybe one large stone thrown upon them, and if somehow they survived that, then the people up on the cliff would be throwing down on them stones until the person died. But very rarely would that happen, and of course it was very rare for the death penalty to ever be used anyway. That's about my theory is that if that story is indeed true, it would have been Sadducees who would have done that, who were solo scriptura, and therefore were almost more like the Taliban type of ideology, eye for an eye. They took it literally, whereas the rabbis, the rabbinical teachings, did not take eye for an eye literally. This type of thing. So the Sadducees would be poking people's eyes out, chopping people's hands off, stoning people. The quote-unquote Pharisees really, they never were poking out people's eyes, etc. And they did have the death penalty, but it was very rare and very sparingly used. Also, here that in a few of the Gospels, and particularly in John, they talk about the trial of Jesus by the Sanhedrin, and people assume the Sanhedrin, that word must mean the Great Court of Jerusalem, which was the rabbinical court. And at different points in history, there were Sadducees in the Great Sanhedrin, but there were also, by that time in history, the word Sanhedrin is a Greek word for a court. And what would have been at that time was that the priests had their own Sanhedrin, their own court. The Talmud calls it Beis Din Shel Kohanim. And since John even mentions there was the chief priests that were judging Jesus, that means it was not the Pharisees that handed Jesus over to the Romans. They would have never done such a thing. That would have been totally anathema and prohibited according to the rabbinical law, the Pharisee law, to hand over even a very wicked Jew over to the Roman authorities, particularly to be tortured in such a horrible and evil way as crucifixion. The Pharisees would have never done such a thing. However, the Sadducees, who were sellouts to Rome and wanted to stay in the good grace of Rome and would be worried about an insurrection and a coup attempt, would have handed over someone like Jesus over to the Romans. That would have been totally consistent with the Sola Scriptura Sadducees, not because of their sola scriptura ideology, but because they were sellouts and scoundrels. And in the Talmud, the Sadducees are not considered ki Yisrael. They're not considered to be like Jews. Their ideology is clearly marked. So the point is that there's one passage in the Talmud that discusses the certain Levitical purity status of Sadducee women was pretty much, they said, yes, they're not Gentiles. Gentiles do not have the laws of impurity that Jews have, but they are not like Jews, because meaning they do not observe the laws of Levitical purity in the proper manner, and so therefore they are considered to be impure all their lives, and assumed to be impure, Levitically speaking, until it is known that they have repented and accepted the traditions of purity from the book of Leviticus. All right. I do want to listen to what Hugh Hewitt has to say about the debate. I probably missed it because I talked for 16 minutes here, but I did want to clear that up. Now, as far as ancestry, the fact of the matter is, yes, the vast majority of people who are part of the Jewish community, and the vast majority of people who identify as Jews, no matter what their ideology is, and their theology is, and their practices are the biological forebearers of ancient Israel. I mean, my mother is Jewish, her parents were both Jewish, and I know that my mother's mother was her father was a Kohen. He was a priest from the lineage of Aaron. He could trace his father's father all the way back to Aaron, the brother of Moses. And on my mother's father's side, I have the whole lineage that goes back to King David. And so I know that I am a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, at least one part of my lineage. I mean, obviously, if you can get back to David, you can get back to Adam. But I have the whole lineage. It's not direct father to son, but between fathers and mothers and so forth, going back, I have my family tree, one part of my family tree that goes back, like I said, to King David. So that's important to recognize that, yes, the majority of the Jewish people today, even though we do have converts and we probably have convert lineage, but we have authentic ancient lineage that goes back as well. We have both. And the other thing is that in order to convert, you need Jews to witness the conversion. The power of conversion is in the hands of Jews. And so spiritually, in a sense almost similar to how Catholics speak of an apostolic succession, every convert can trace their conversion back to someone who goes back to that time. So, even if they're a descendant of converts, but whichever rabbinical court performed the conversion has a certain aspect there that because we do have an idea. I mean, what I'm saying about my family lineage is biological, but there is also an idea of ideological children, Talmidim Elu Habanim, that when it says you should teach it diligently unto your children, that includes your disciples as well. And so a disciple is like a son in a certain sense. And so even if it's not necessarily biological, there is a connection. So thank you for watching. So the truth is, yes, the Jews today are the authentic forebearers of the ancient biblical Israel. For the majority, converts are a minority in the Jewish community. The majority are biologically so, and if you're Orthodox, then you're theologically so, and that is by testimony of the Christian scriptures, meaning Jesus is quoted in the Christian scriptures as saying that the traditions of rabbinical Judaism are the authentic traditions of Moses. And so, you know, if you would ask, let's say, a Catholic about this, they would say, well, Jesus started a new church. He started a new religion. He wasn't restoring the biblical idea of of Moses. Jesus started a new church. And that is the way that Christianity always looked at it, not in the way that those Christians who call themselves Messianic Jews and who are Judaizers and conflate Judaism and Christianity, which both traditional Christianity and traditional Judaism would frown upon. But I don't oppose freedom of religion. Go ahead, believe what you want. But what my point is that historically, it was something new. You see in the writings of Paul that something new was developed. It wasn't a restoration. It wasn't in the way how a lot of Messianic Jews would say that one is being a completed Jew by accepting Jesus. It's something new. It's a new religion. It's something different. Now, did that religion bring the ideas of Torah to the world? Yes, and so we're thankful for that. That's a beautiful and wonderful thing. Even if we deny that and disagree with that, and deny many of the claims of Christianity, we can still recognize the positive development for the world, even though the Jewish people have suffered under Christians and Muslims. We can see that Christianity and its other, child, Islam, have turned the largely pagan world into monotheists, mostly, and have influenced the polytheists in the world to accept basic ideas of human rights that come from our Torah. And so therefore, that is a positive development in the world. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later. And we love everybody. We don't hate anybody just because we disagree with them. I often will say that I have much more in common. I was watching a few Catholic videos on political issues, and this one speaker, he was discussing how uncomfortable he is with a lot of nominal Catholics and lapsed Catholics. And I wrote back to him, I said, but the truth is, we have the same problem with our lapsed Jews and our nominal Jews. And we have much more in common. I would say this speaker and I, obviously we disagree on issues of theology, but politically speaking, and in many other issues, we agree. And we have much more in common. Even though I am a Jew and he's a Catholic, because of our devotions and our orthodoxy, and our understanding that that should influence our political views, that we have more in common one with another than I would have with apostate Jews like Soros or Sanders, or nominal Jews like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that he would have with nominal Catholics like AOC, Joe Biden, etc. This, we should, kind of be able to, yes, embrace our differences, and I don't have any design to change this person away from his Catholicism, and he might have a design to take me away from my Judaism, but I don't really care, because if he, I know that that's coming from a place of love and belief that he's right. But we have so much to agree on politically and socially and so forth that there's a lot what to talk about here. So we can find common ground, and we can live in peace and find certain amount of fellowship. I don't know if he might agree with this or not, but I remember listening to a Catholic speaker, and I've mentioned this many times before, who was discussing how, in the eyes of the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church and the Jehovah's Witness Church and so forth are not authentic Christianity, and they do not recognize members of these communities as Christians. However, they can still live in peace and find fellowship and be friends with these people that they have strong theological disagreements with, even though they don't believe they're Christians, even though they claim themselves to be Christians. Obviously, I don't claim to be a Christian, and I would imagine the same thing would be. And again, it's possible that this man, who's more of a militant, that's the name that he has in his YouTube channel, and I think he used that name before the channel, it sounds like. But maybe he might disagree. Maybe he would say we shouldn't have fellowship with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, and also not with the Jews. I don't know. But there's certainly what to discuss. There are ways to embrace other people that we disagree with without selling ourselves out. I'm not going to mention the name of the rabbi who said this because he's controversial, and I know mentioning his name triggers some people who I respect very highly because they had very bad experiences with him. But there was one rabbi, he was a singer, people know who I'm talking about, who I think very eloquently said as follows. He said, I can think my wife is beautiful without thinking everybody else's wife is ugly. And so the same thing, I can love my religion, I can love my culture without hating other cultures. And we can agree to disagree, and we can fellowship respectfully without selling ourselves out. And so, just because I don't think everyone else's wife is ugly doesn't give a license to commit the infidelity, which is a capital sin, as we mentioned earlier. So the same thing, I can recognize that there are people in the world who disagree with my theology, and I can still respect them without engaging in their practices. I'm not going to go and and drink mead at a bloat with practitioners of Asatru or Norse paganism, even though mead is pretty good, and it was a popular Jewish drink for a long time historically. Certainly in Germany, in those countries, it was just as popular among Jews as it was among non-Jews. So that's pretty much what I have to share. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you all later. Take care.